Hi there, my name is Paulina Marquez. I am a webtoon and comics author, and I will be showing you some of the Clip Studio Paint tools I use to work faster while creating my Spanish webtoon original series, Rosa de Girasol or Rose and Sunflower. Before we begin, my first advice is analyze how you work. All of our workflows are different, so please look at your own processes and adapt this information I will show you here to your own needs. This video is meant to be a starting point for you to change it as you please. There is no correct answer here, just take what works best for you and change what doesn't. Number 1. Workspace. This is how Clip Studio looks freshly installed. I will now organize the palettes to fit my workflow. If you click on the menu window and then on Workspace, you will see Clip already has some default workspaces you can use. These do not exactly fit my needs, so instead I will customize my workspace and then save it as a new preset. First, I will close all of the palettes I do not use. I don't use the brush size palette because I like to change my brush size up here. So I will click on the small menu on the upper left side of the palette and go to the bottom option to hide it. I don't do any animation work, so I will hide the timeline palette too, the all sides view palette too. Here on the right we have the navigator, which I do use, and next to it is the SubView panel, which is one of my favorite tools, so I will drag it here to make it more accessible. I don't use the item bank, so I will hide it. I don't use the information panel either, so I will hide it. And here on the left we have the quick access and material palettes. I do like having quick access, but I like it when it has its own column, so I will drag it and change the size of the column. Next we have a layer property, which I do use. Next one is search layer, which I will rearrange. I don't use animation cells, so I will hide it. And I like having search layer next to the layer palette, so I will drag it here. Layer is basic, so I'll leave it there, and I like having history too, but I will move the auto action palette up here. Next, I will close all of the color palettes I don't use. I like working with the color wheel, the sliders, and the color history, but the rest of it I will close. This is the arrangement I found worked best for me for making webtoons. My layer panel is very tall because webtoons have a lot of layers, and my subtool palette is rather tall as well because I like having my brushes accessible. Now here's where the knowing your workflow part comes in. Think about what tools you use the most, which ones you use the least, and don't be afraid to shake things up if there's something that doesn't feel completely right. Once you're satisfied with your arrangement, you can click on Window, and at the bottom you can lock the position, width, and height of the palettes if you wish. Then you can save your workspace by going to Workspace and Register Workspace. I'll save mine, and if something gets moved around or closed by mistake, you can just go back to this menu and reload your workspace like this. I've made my workspace available as a free asset. You can search for my name, Paulina, or click on the link in the description box. It includes the palette arrangement and some shortcuts I adapted from that other digital drawing software since I was too used to them. Check it out if you want. Now let's go to number 2, the SubView palette. You know who doesn't get enough love and attention? It's the SubView palette. She's so beautiful, okay? Now, let me explain why I love it so much. When creating webtoons, I know some artists have the color palette of their characters set up on the swatches or set color panels, and I know some others like to have a file with their color palette open in a separate tab or window and they will go back and forth. My problem with this is they're so ineffective. I tried the swatches method for a webtoon I made years ago and I was always struggling to remember which colors went where. My webtoon's colors were all over the place because of this. And the problem with having the file open on a separate tab is that's so much clicking. All of those clicks might be fractions of a second, but if you add them up, it ends up being a lot of wasted time. And you need to open the file every single time you open the program, which is just annoying. The SubView palette is beautiful because it solves this problem in a very simple way. The SubView palette is essentially a visualizer for reference images. To use it, we just have to click on the folder icon here and select an image or a clip file. I have these reference images I made while working on my webtoon. This opens the image. One of the features of this palette is that no matter which tool I'm using, as soon as my mouse hovers on top of it, it'll change. In this case, it's a hand to move the image around. Using the controls below the image, we can zoom in, zoom out, rotate it, flip it, and reset both rotation and size. But the true magic of the SubView palette is really in this little icon right here. With this icon selected, every time my mouse hovers on top of the palette, it automatically changes to an eyedropper. With it, we can now select any color from the image. No additional clicks needed. This is super useful if you're coloring a comic or webtoon. For example, here I'm eyedropping colors from the reference, and as you see, I'm not making any clicks. I don't have to change files. It's just so easy to select these colors. If you need to have more images, you can just add them. Click again on the folder icon and select the ones you need. You can browse through them with these two arrows here. And if you don't need an image anymore, you can just click on the trash icon to clear it. You can also add here any image files you open frequently. For example, this is a tattoo of one of my characters. If I add it to the palette and click here on the edit button, it will open the image. This way I can open these files without having to look for them in my file explorer. While working on my webtoon, I created a ton of images to put in here, some for eye-dropping colors, others just for visual references, and they helped me not to waste any time looking for them or opening other bigger files and looking for what I needed. So I recommend you use this as much as possible, especially if you're working on a webtoon. Number 3. Auto actions and shortcuts for small tasks. If you make webtoons on Clip Studio, you've probably heard or already use automatic actions, and they can be great for complex things. I myself made several of them for my webtoon for creating effects or applying a bunch of commands in one go. But actions can also be really simple and save us tons of time. This is one of my favorite webtoon organization tricks. For this part, I will use episode 38 of my webtoon as example. This is how a finished panel looks like, and one of the most common things I did while working on my webtoon was creating a line art folder, then creating a layer for each character, double clicking on them, and writing the character's name. But that's so boring. So what was my solution? First, let's go to the Auto Action palette and create a new set of actions. We can do so by clicking the icon next to the set name, or by clicking on the small menu icon on the left and selecting Create New Set. I named mine character layers, and my first action will be Luisa, like my main character. To record the actions, I will click the red button, and then I will go to the layer panel to create a new vector layer because I work in vector layers. As you can see, the action gets recorded, and now I will double click on the layer to rename it and stop the recording. And that's it. The action recorded the name I assigned to the layer, and now I will create a couple more actions using the same method, this time with other character names. Now that I have my actions ready, I will go to Clip Studio Paint and Shortcut Settings to open the shortcut settings window. Here I'll open the category drop-down and select Auto Actions. In Clip Studio, you can assign any keystroke to any command. The easiest way for me to remember them is to use the initial of their names and Shift, since Shift has no assigned combinations. I'll click on Edit Shortcut and assign Shift L to Luisa, Shift J to Has, Shift G to the Classes layer, and Shift D to Dahlia. I will also assign the shortcut Command Alt L to an action I previously made, which creates my line art folder. And now I will organize my file. I select my first panel, then hit Ctrl Alt L and Shift L. Second panel, Ctrl Alt L and Shift J. Third panel, the same thing. And finally, the fourth panel. And it's done. Now my layers are named, my file is organized, it only took me a few seconds and it wasn't a hassle at all. For the finishing touch, I'll use an action that sets my layout draft layer. And finished! Look how pretty and organized it is. This was recorded in real time, it was not sped up, so it's a really fast way to work. But what if you don't have a keyboard, or if you're working on a tablet, or if the keyboard is not easy to reach? Here's where we go to number 4, the Quick Access Palette. If you have a small physical workspace or you work on a tablet, the Quick Access Palette is a great way to access actions or commands that otherwise would have to be accessed with a keyboard or a bunch of clicks. Let's set it up. I have the Quick Access Palette here. If you don't see it on your screen, just go to the Window menu and select Quick Access here. The Quick Access Palette works with sets of buttons. By default, we already have a set 1 with some of the most often used commands while drawing, like undo, delete, cut, copy and paste, etc. I like this set, so I will leave it as is and go to set 2 to edit it. So we click on set 2 and see that it is empty. Clicking on the Quick Access settings will bring up a window where we can choose the commands we want to add to our set. We can choose any menu command or any of the options we see here. I'll go to Auto Actions and add some actions to the palette. This is a set I already had because I made it for my webtoon, and as an example, I will add Object Shine by selecting it and clicking Add. I'll also add the white stroke and the background blur ones. And here we have our actions in the Quick Access palette. This is nice and all, but all the icons are the same and it could make it a little bit confusing when working, so what we're going to do is right-click our button and select the Icon Settings option. Here we can select an image file to replace the current icon. There are a lot of icons available online for free. My favorite to use are these icons by DeviantArt user Acid Scratch. I'll leave the link in the description below. I will select this icon and click on OK, then OK again, and as you can see, now the command is much easier to recognize. Another customizing option is adding a color background to our icon by clicking here and selecting a color. I will repeat it for the last one. To rearrange the icons, you should just drag them, and if you want to delete one of them, just right-click and delete. To create a brand new set, just click on the small menu and select New Set. I'll name mine Character Names, and I will add to it the actions I made earlier. Right-clicking the space here, I will choose the Quick Access settings and repeat the steps I showed you before. And that's it! Now we can access these commands without the need for a keyboard. This set will also show up if you're using the companion mode of mobile, which we'll talk about in the next section. Number 5. The remote controls. It seems like not a lot of people know that Clip Studio has actually two remote control options. There's the Clip Studio Tab Mate, a dedicated remote control, and the companion mode for smartphones on the Clip Studio mobile app. So let's look at the Clip Studio Tab Mate first. The Clip Studio Tab Mate is a Bluetooth remote controller. If you look at mine, it's pretty worn and I had to fix it with tape, but it's really resistant and it works great. It's ergonomic, it's light, and all of its buttons can be customized to wherever you can imagine. It has 4 modes, and each mode can completely have different settings from the rest. Let me show you how I use it. I've opened this file, and right here on the right you'll see the TabMate settings window, which highlights the buttons I press. I've been using the wheel to zoom in and out, the up button is set to switching between move layer and the object tool. I have a button up here set to undo. Now, if I go to this layer and I click on the left button, it will transform my object. But if I click it twice, it will hide my ruler. This is one of the many ways you can use the TabMate controller. You can also set the buttons to only show things while you're pressing it, like the quick access palette I have set on the center button. As you can see, you can set virtually any command you want, or even several commands in one button. To me, the TabMate is an extremely useful tool since it makes my workflow faster and takes care of the strain in my hand at the same time. The hand you don't use to draw can also get injured if you're not careful. I will leave the link to the Clip Studio TabMate mini site below. You can buy it on the Amazon link there. Now, if you don't feel the need to invest in the Clip Studio TabMate but would like to have a remote control to work with, good news is you can use your phone. The companion mode is a mode on Clip Studio Paint for mobiles where you can use it to control and access some commands while you work on your computer or tablet. I will focus more on the features I find more useful for webtoon creation, and I will leave a link below to an official Clip Studio tutorial where all the functions are explained in detail. To connect my phone, I will open my app and click on Get Started. Then I will click on the companion mode icon on the upper right side of the screen, and it will ask me to scan a QR code to link my device. On my main device, I'll click on the Clip Studio Paint menu and then on Connect to Smartphone, and the QR code will show up for me to scan it. The first thing we'll see is the quick access palette with the sets I currently have on my computer. We can switch between sets, but we cannot edit them. Any changes must be done directly on the computer or tablet. Next, we have the color wheel where we can choose any color as well as modify the opacity and size of our selected brush. There's the gesture pad where we can move our canvas around and even tap with 2 or 3 fingers to undo and redo. Next is the SubView palette. Unfortunately, it won't let us eyedrop a color directly from the image, but it will take most of them and place them here as swatches. It does support having several images open, and just as in desktop, we can browse through them using the arrows and delete them with the trash icon. Then we have the mixing palette where we can paint, blend, and select the colors we create. And finally, we have my absolute favorite, which is the preview screen. Here we can preview the work we are working on as it will look on a smartphone. This is incredibly useful when making webtoons, and I wish this feature had been available back when I was publishing mine, because it would have saved me a lot of headaches. You can use this to figure out the pacing of your work, how the colors look, if your text is the right size, all without having to create a new file to check on your phone every single time you make a change. I love this feature so much. And last but not least, we have these 3 buttons which represent the Ctrl, Alt and Shift buttons, and they even tell us which feature we are using when we press one or more of them. And that's it. This video ended up being quite long and is my first video, but I hope you found something new to use in your workflow to spend less time clicking things and more time actually drawing. If you liked this video, let me know in the comments, and if you're curious about my work, you can check it out on my website. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day!